Capital of the world, you've landed on the Daily Objective from the Ayn Rand Center UK, bringing you history's largest daily network of original programming, influenced and inspired by Ayn Rand's philosophy of objectivism. And we have, as they say, breaking news for you today on a story that is quite germane to our at-home viewers, subscribers, members from jolly old England. This breaking news that Liz Truss, Prime Minister for what, Nikos, 40-some days.
44 days.
Resigned. She's resigned. And she was, essentially, as we had covered here on the channel, been open, at least, unlike so many previous prime ministers, open to some basic individualist free market ideas, fracking, legalization of immigration, among the rest. That's all off now. So we're going to cover it, as always, from hopefully the perspective of a student of philosophy. We're all students here, learning together. We're here with Mark Pellegrino, actor, activist, host, and great friend of the channel. Thank you, Mark, for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
As always, thank you for having me. And Nikos, we're going to need you more than anyone. I mean, you are not only a scholar at several institutions around the world, but an astute observer of the political scene. So, get us started here and bring our audience, who I know is global and from all around the world. I see Ali, Robert, Kathleen, Francis, so many awesome super chatters and supporters for the channel already streaming into the super chat. Bring us up to speed on just essentially, especially from a philosophical perspective, what the heck's going on in the UK?
Yeah, so Lenin had this phrase that sometimes in years, you get years where nothing happens and then weeks when years are happening. And this is one of these cases. These last weeks have been a historical time and a time of clarity. So 45 days ago, Liz Truss becomes the new prime minister in the UK. And she has a very clear message. Her message is, which she put it on the table before she became prime minister, that I will be a prime minister who will try to liberalize the economy, to cut taxes, and to bring some measures such as getting rid of some useless regulations, mostly on a symbolic level, nothing very, very important. And I need to do this because we come after years of crazy spending because of COVID and because of very low interest rates. And also we're in a period of inflation and the energy prices are going to go up. So I need to do something drastic. And for once, she said, we need to stand up to what we are supposed to believe, which is that the free market is going to get us out of this mess. And she chose also a finance minister, as we'd call him in the US, Kwasi Kwarteng, who was part of this program. Now, what happened was the biggest attack by every single part of public opinion and of opinion makers to this program by Liz Truss. Newspapers, academics, other politicians, international institutions, and also the markets voted in some ways with their wallet. It seemed to be the case, and actually seem not to be very enthusiastic with the reforms in the UK. And then Liz Truss, oh, by the way, super important lesson here. We've been told by leftists for ages that we live in a society and a culture where capitalism is dominating. We live in this neoliberalism hegemony, people in the left tell us. And what did we see happening? First time in a generation, first time after Margaret Thatcher, where a politician whispers something about freedom, something about free market, and she lasts 45 days. However, I have very little sympathy for Liz Truss, despite all this. Why? Because when people were up in arms, what did she do? She started the compromises. First thing, she told to the finance minister, who is this group that no one likes? The very rich. Oh, whatever tax release we gave to them, take it back. As if thinking that what she needed to do was appease. What are you going to appease? The Guardian? Are you going to appease George Monbiot? Is this how you plan to govern? Anyway, as if this was not enough. By the way, at that moment, when I say we, I mean our community, or at least me and Razi, we knew it was over. Once you take this thing back and you throw under the bus the rich and you say, oh, we're gonna we're going to kickstart the economy, but who cares about these people? These people, we're going to milk them. The next step was some weeks later to fire the finance minister, the Chancellor Kwarteng. She thought that she could save herself by doing this. Of course, she couldn't. She was done for. And yet today, some hours ago, happened what everyone was expecting to happen, which is that the Tory party got rid of her. So there are many lessons, many things that could happen now, many things that we say, but this is the overview of the last few weeks. Back to you.
Mark, Bonnie Bertrand on the Super Chat says, if you can't stand up for principles, you don't have any.
That's right. I mean, if we've seen it time and time again, you know, when you lay a principle down and then go back on it, you've lost the fight already. This is a very disturbing piece of news to me. Nikos, you're going to have to help me find the positive in this, because she proposed an economic plan that was very Reagan-esque, very Thatcher-esque, and has always worked in the past to derail the kinds of economic issues that we have today. You know, inflation, stagflation, impending recession and depression. It's always liberalizing markets that have helped this, but to see the world markets and pundits aligned against liberalization in such a way as to cause, according to Yahoo News at least, market chaos is disturbing. It feels like we've now crossed the Rubicon, so to speak, and we're in status territory. And to exercise ourselves from there, to cut ourselves out of that status tumor, will kill us. Somebody help me see the bright side to free market politician losing.
Well, Nikos, I don't know, Nikos, you want to jump in there? I mean, I'll
go first, Jonathan,
please.
and then I'll jump in.
Oh, well, I'll just say, I mean, you know, the irony, Mark, in this you alluded to. I mean, people always say, what if you could get a great objectivist could be president? What if we could get Yaron Brook to be president? What if we could get Dr. Peikoff to be president? And, you know, the truth is that no one would listen to them. I mean, it seems, again, this is from an American's perspective, alluding to what you said, Nikos, as if these ideas are simply not popular. Individualism is seen as abhorrent. It is not seen as virtuous. And not unlike what happened here during the Obama years, when the so-called stimulus for the 2008 financial crisis, they said they voted against the stimulus, the market went down, and then everyone said, oh, we better have a stimulus. I mean, there's no trust, even, Mark, to your point, that, gee, if we stick to free market principles over the long run, wealth is created. The expectation is, gee, if market goes down, we better do something. We have to have a stimulus. You know, if we have a free market prime minister in the UK, the market goes down, oh, we got to get rid of her. And it's just unfortunately, a short-term thinking, but it kind of gets to what you both, I think, are always illuminating. The fact is that you can't put politics ahead of philosophy. And perhaps the public is simply not ready for these free market ideologies, at least in the UK. And thank you, Ashley. Thank you, Free Trade. Thank you, Mary Aline, all supporting us this afternoon. And we'll get to your questions in just a minute.
Just to say really quick before you jump in, I mean, you know, we cannot be ready for these free market principles, but the longer this goes on, the more it's going to hurt when we actually have to save our own lives, go back to these free market principles. You can't avoid the pain now, folks.
So, yeah, this is where I'm getting at. So I'm not saying that there's something positive. I'm saying there's something interesting. And here's the interesting thing. So sooner or later, actually more towards the sooner rather than towards the later, the economy is going to completely tank, right? And then what will be the narrative? The narrative will be that, oh, it was neoliberalism, it was free market fundamentalism, all this BS that we hear from the left, except that this time it will be very, very, very difficult to sell this argument. I'm trying to find some interesting data that I had in front of me, but anyway, so if you see actually how statism has worked for the UK, all these years. Where is the debt in relation to GDP? How much is their unfunded liabilities? How much is the absolute, the external debt? How much is their deficit? When you see all these things, and when you tell them, people, for 2 weeks, basically, for 2 weeks, we had, quote, a neoliberal in government. We had, quote, how to put it? We had, quote, a free marketeer in government. Are you trying to tell me that from 1989 or from 1991, when was that Thatcher fell from power? Till today, it was these 2 weeks. It was the 2 weeks of neoliberalism that brought us there. Under Labour, the state became larger. And actually, Labour gave us, New Labour with Blair gave us the nanny state. Cameron was this new Tory party. He didn't want it anymore to be known as the nasty party. So he changed the logo. The idea was we have nothing to do with the Thatcher and these things. Then we had Boris Johnson, who spent like there was no tomorrow during the pandemic. He was also the guy who went all in the green agenda. And among all these things, we had literally 2 weeks of someone who whispered, he didn't even put the policies in practice, whispered something about free markets. Now,
it really emphasizes, doesn't it, Mark, the importance of morality? Because look, if you wanted to make people wealthy, you would vote for a capitalist economy. We know that, but because it seems like it's seen as so abhorrent, oh, you're being selfish. Like Nico said, you're favoring the so-called rich. It's like, that's off the table. Mary Leen asks, how does this going to affect the US economy? Look, a more poor UK is worse for citizens of the UK and the rest of the world in terms of trade, in terms of innovation. Wherever there could be capitalism and there's not, there's a wasted opportunity for us all.
Not only that, but Yahoo News, when they wrote the article about this fiasco, has sort of fired a shot over the bow of politicians internationally, saying that this should be a cue for all politicians to watch what they do. Now that is a scary warning. That to me is telling any politician who thinks that the free market and tax cuts are going to pull us out of the nosedive that we're in should take fair warning from her meltdown in England and not do that anymore. Keep yourself connected to this state apparatus and keep the IVs from the state flowing into your veins, because there's no other solution. That's scary to me, man.
It is scary, but you know what is going to be scarier for them? Reality.
But have they ever, check it out. Now I just helped my adopted daughter with her college history, and it was about the Industrial Revolution and the New Deal. It was a fluff job. It was as if the Republicans were evil villains whose interests were thrown in for the wealthy. Everybody else was struggling and in decay. Along comes FDR, and he makes everything better. This is the world that we're living in right now, where there's contempt for wealth, a lack of understanding of where it comes from, how it's produced, and what preserves it, and how generalized that wealth becomes, and how well distributed it actually becomes in a free society. There's contempt for liberalism everywhere. Even in the conservatives in America, who are supposed to be the guardians of classical liberalism, have abandoned it completely. I'm just reading a book now where called The Psychology of Totalitarianism, where the person, ostensibly a conservative, is embracing the idea that the Enlightenment and individualism are responsible for the totalitarian mind. Okay, this is the twisted world we live in. So all I'm saying is reality happens, and yet it is evaded. And that evasion is codified in textbooks and passed on to people, and the evasion continues. We've been in 125 years of evasion. How much reality can people take?
Ali, thank you for your generous contribution. Ali says, interesting episode, boys. I understand economics a little bit better when y'all talk about the markets like this. Math was really not my strong point, LOL. I actually don't think it's necessarily any of our strong points as either. But we all know just from a observation of history that the most prosperous countries, the most prosperous periods have always been the most capitalist. And to your point, Mark, maybe I'm projecting, but it's not necessarily wealth necessarily. It seems like they're against, but it's the idea of selfish wealth, right? The idea if you're gonna just let billionaires keep their wealth, that's selfish. That's rewarding selfishness, not rewarding need. It just seems like that's what's seen as so absolutely abhorrent these days. That if you are acknowledging where wealth comes from and respectful of those who produce it, you are seen as immoral. You are seen as wrong, and that's a really fundamental schism in the global psyche.
Let's add something though, so that we give our audience a proper understanding of what happened. So, why were the markets so opposed to Liz Truss's program? Now, one element is that they're not comfortable with this type of policies, but there was something else that, in which case, they had a point. When you're in such a pit, when you're in such a hole in the ground, you also need to make sure that you cut your expenses. So a lot of the criticism was this, that look, you're cutting the money that are going to come in the state because you're cutting taxes, but you're not cutting your expenses. Therefore, what we expect that will happen is that soon you're going to have a bigger deficit. Soon you're going to have to borrow more or do something else. And we don't think that you're going to do this. Now, what would be the obvious solution? To say, we are going to cut. We are going to cut from the nanny state or from the huge state that is in the UK. I'm not telling you cut from the NHS, because this is not going to happen in 3 centuries. But at least start cutting from the Leviathan, which is the state. And of course, the Conservatives are not ready to do this. So it's not completely crazy from the markets, whatever that means, to have a pessimist view of the UK future. Of course, they should still have a very pessimist view, because at least this step was in the right direction. It was incomplete, but in the right direction. If the new prime minister is Rishi Sunak, as I hear,
what kind of confidence do people have in the ideas of capitalism that the moment they seem to support them and the markets go down, they say, oh no, we were just kidding, And to your point, at least how history is taught in America, is that greedy free market capitalists caused the 2008 global financial crisis. So to your point, that whole revisionist history has been taught so that people like Mark's stepdaughter, that's what they're learning in books as well.
So what's going to happen now? So first of all, according to the rules, there has to be someone from the parliamentary team, let's say, of the party. Most people think Rishi Sunak is the one who is going to be the new prime minister. Now, who is this guy? He's a guy who has the typical centrist agenda. So he's going to say, well, at some point, we're going to cut some taxes, but he's going to be, he was the guy who was Boris Johnson's guy when it comes to his economic agenda. So it's going to be more of the same until the ship sinks. And also to understand how difficult is our work, in terms of the opinion polls, the Conservatives are in a historic low. When I say historic low, I mean the whole history of the party. They've never been so unpopular. And they were trading something like 30 points behind Labour. Just to remind you that in 2019, Conservatives won the election in a landslide. 3 years later, they're 30 points behind. I don't recall any other time in history that,
what does this mean?
What I remember, that I've seen something like that.
What is this? Does this mean that the population of the UK has been completely socialized and that they're now embedded in political patronage? I mean,
of course. But do you have any doubt about that?
Let's make no mistake about this. For anybody out there who supports government programs, the government programs aren't there to help you. They're political patronage. They're there to make you a constituent, an active constituent of that the political party that's giving you that benefit. That's all it is. They're making you a dependent. It's politically cynical. If you read Burton Folsom Jr.'s book, New Deal or Raw Deal, you see the way Franklin Roosevelt used the New Deal programs to manipulate states into voting for him. He got them hooked on the patronage, he got them hooked on the federal government, and then they couldn't get out of it, right? They needed it. Their constituencies now depended on the patronage of the federal government. And this is what is happening in England too. People are dependent on this crap. And there's no easy solution. It is, as you said, Nikos, she's fell into the same trap that conservatives have been falling into for decades here in the States. They cut taxes, but they don't cut spending. They spend like drunken sailors. So our deficits keep growing. And then what gets the short end of the shrift? Capitalism, because these people are supposed to be the vanguard, the standard bearers for capitalism, and all people see is more debt, more government growth.
That's exactly what Phil has said. Thank you, Phil. Super great contribution to the Ayn Rand Center UK. Phil says, we get the glib politicians we deserve collectively. The victims are individual capitalists. And James, also with a really generous contribution for the Ayn Rand Center UK. Thank you, James, says, the moral is the practical. The implementation was rushed and brought more turbulence at the wrong time. This wasn't just unpopular, but badly managed. I mean, Nikos, they needed you out there. I mean, my hope is that I'm not giving up the UK at all. I think we have subscribers who are going to be the next generation of political advisors who, not unlike Martin Anderson in the US, was able to abolish the draft. I mean, we just need to get some of the right ideas, not in just the UK culture, but to the UK government, so that when Liz Truss is asked, oh, you're cutting taxes for rich people, somebody could stand up and actually give not just a practical defense, but a moral defense as well. How about it, Nikos?
I'm with you on principle, but here's the lesson for the activists. We need to be on the rooftops on that, and we need to talk to conservatives all the time and tell them, look, you have been bamboozled. The left has, or to people who have ears, the left has been telling you that you live under capitalism, that capitalism is the hegemonic ideology. Naomi Klein made a career with the idea of the quote, the shock doctrine. We've had the boogeyman of neoliberalism. Take all this and throw it to the trash. You saw with your own eyes that this is a lie. You had the first person in a generation who was in a position of power, Kwasi Kwarteng, the finance minister. And he lasted, 2 weeks? He lasted even less than 20 days, something like that. And then he was sacked. And the person who got him there, Liz Truss, lasted 40 days. What?
I'm saying he pulled what we call in the United States here a Scaramucci. He was in a position for only a short period of time.
Yeah, this tells you all you need to know about what are the ideas that have shaped the modern world. So that's why, in a Machiavellian way, I say when we have the next collapse, which is going to be not much in the distant future, I assume, then we need to be ready with our narrative and not do what we did in 2008. Not we, but at least conservatives who were talking about greedy bankers and who were talking about the crisis as if it was an act of nature, that one day it rained and the next day it was the crisis.
Yeah, but I feel like the more we embrace the concept of democracy, the more bromidal politicians become, the more soundbitey they get. They don't make sophisticated arguments anymore, and the population is not capable of, I think, retaining any sophisticated arguments. And our position is sort of sophisticated. Now, perhaps we can get somebody who has a genius for jingles, who can come up with slogans that, hit people as hard as hope and change, or make America great again, but that actually has real resonance and some profound influence. But I wonder, you have to make a case, and people don't have the intellectual capacity to grasp the case. It's easier to say the rich suck, eat the rich, beat them up. It's easier to look at the world as if it's, wealth is a finite pie, and if you have something, it's at my expense. That's the easy way to look at things. And I see that I see that everywhere in social media. Now, it could be that because social media is dominated by the left, that's just the way it is. And there's a silent majority out there that's deeper. But I don't know, man. I don't see the intellectuals on the right offering the right solutions. You know, their solutions.
Miss Rand's titles, Mark, at this point, the virtue of selfishness and capitalism, the unknown ideal. Just the titles are still radical. They're still as radical as they were 40 years ago, 30
and
years.
And madness. That's madness. It's as if we haven't learned anything. And when you see conservatives who are supposed to be the intellectuals of the conservative movement, now coming out against the Enlightenment, against individualism, and even reason. Now they're becoming radical skeptics themselves and saying, look, reason isn't the answer. Reason is in fact leading us to this technocracy, this totalitarian mindset. You have fucking gone down the rabbit hole. Pardon my French.
Well, if you see what the culture warriors of the right in the UK are saying, their takeaway of this is that we need a right-wing populist party, which will be against immigration, against globalism, whatever that means, and, drumroll, against free market fundamentalists. So I've said it in the past, I'll say it again. The biggest historical injustice in modern political history is that Jeremy Corbyn, the socialist, did not become prime minister in 2019. This is exactly what the country deserves. This is exactly what the conservatives deserve. And they're going to get it sooner or later. It's not going to be Corbyn because he's done, but it's going to be something like Corbyn because the right, the conservative, or the dissident right, however you want to call them, they don't deserve anything better. They're their intellectual cousins, and that's what they'll get.
This is true, but my concern is once they get that disastrous politician in there who does disastrous things and tanks the economy, like we all know will happen, we'll see the same kinds of evasions and denials that we've been seeing for frickin' decades. Did socialism fail in the Soviet Union? No, it wasn't socialism. It wasn't real socialism. Did it fail in Venezuela? Oh, it's not real socialism over there. You know, all we hear is that it's not real socialism that's failing everywhere in the world where it's tried. And that, I think that narrative seems to have resonance with people. It continues irrespective of the facts. So, okay, the economy tanks. You maybe Nikos, the idea is like you said, to stand on the rooftops and trumpet, you know, our version of things, and maybe it will be enough to tip things in a different direction.
Talking about shouting from the rooftops, tomorrow I'll be with Yaron in Oslo. So if anyone who have friends in Norway or in Scandinavia, come and say hi. Check out Yaron's Twitter. And on Tuesday, we'll be in Madrid. So we are doing our best. We are traveling. We're talking to people to pass the message. Of course, ARCUK is doing the same. So support Razi. He's the only voice in the UK who is a principal voice literally the only voice, by the way. The think tanks were, oh, we know these were good policies because GDP might % boring. Supporting people who are not standing up to the occasion, support the Ayn Rand Center UK.
And we've got so many. Kathleen, thank you for your contribution. Phil points out that this is a good example of how empires are lost even before they begin. And he also makes the point, Nikos, that you predicted this sublimely in your book about tribalism. You foresaw, and you obviously influenced by Miss Rand's philosophy, you foresaw and you wrote about this, upwards of a year plus ago.
Yeah, thanks. I'm not sure what exactly I predicted, but I take that I predicted it.
Marilyn says The Founder's Fatal Flaw is an excellent essay by Brad Thompson, the Redneck Intellectual. I subscribe to that. It's on Substack. More essays coming. General welfare must go. Just one of many points that apply here. And Nick Bruno, thank you for your contribution. Great super chats here today. I mean, this gives me a lot of hope about the UK. We've got tremendous support all throughout Europe. People are energized by these radical ideas, these leftist ideas, these nationalist ideas. This is the same old boring rehash. Capitalism, objectivism, that's what's radical. And Nick points out that that's the cure to all ills. So thank you to all. Marilyn, once again, pointing out that the so-called general welfare is socialism, and we know how well that's always worked out.
Let me also, since we're talking about announcements, so I now also have a YouTube channel when this, besides what I'm doing for ARCUK and ARI, I'm going to be posting some personal projects, let's say. The first is a video called 2 Productivity Lessons from Howard Rourke. So first, I encourage you to go check it. It's a video I'm happy with. But relevant to ARCUK, next weekend, there's going to be a productivity hub for members of ARCUK only on the topic of what we can learn from Howard Rourke. So we will reverse engineer Rourke's productivity and how he's such a creator. And yes, so check out the video, become a member, or if you're a member, you're going to hear from Razi and Daniel about that thing. And it's going to be good. It's not going to be just, oh, he works hard. But how does he work hard? How does he manage to work so consistently? And he works hard, whether he's in the quarry or whether he's building a skyscraper. So it's going to be an interesting event next weekend, not in 3 days, in 10 days. You're going to hear more about that.
You have to support what we're doing here. We're bringing people like Mark Pellegrino, sending Nikos all around Europe, bringing you live events, getting into the culture, making a difference, being your advocates on the most important issues, intellectual issues, the things that are really going to change the culture. Coming up tonight at 10 p.m. UK, Life on Earth with Robert Nasser. He's going to talk about toxic everything. So support us. Be part of our philosophy posse. Be a part of what Mark's doing, what Rucka's doing, all of what we're doing. Be part of our daily conversation here, and thank you for doing it. So we'll wrap it up there. But Mark, I'm going to give you the last word and any final thoughts about this complete debacle in the UK.
Wow. Well, my final thoughts are that Ayn Rand's objectivism is the antidote to this kind of nonsense, and we have to do our utmost to change the culture, because the culture is what animates these politics, and changing the culture will change the politics.
And Nico said, quick final thoughts from
Final quote. This is a moment of clarity. Again, what we've been saying, and other people say, no, it's not that politics is going to bring the change. No, politics brings debacle. Does this mean we give up? No, it means we work harder. It means we try harder. We've got reality on our side.
And we're doing it. In fact, coming up this Sunday, if you're a member of the Ayn Rand Center UK, we've got a new Zoom class with James Valiant. James is among, I would say, the top 4 or 5 objectivist scholars that I'm aware of living today. Extraordinarily knowledgeable. He's got a Zoom class, but you've got to be a member of the Ayn Rand Center UK. So hit us up online, become a member of what we're doing. Thank you, Francis, Bonnie, Apollo, and all of you for joining us on the Super Chat today. For Nikos, for Mark, thank you for being here. We'll see you tomorrow. And until then, we wish you best premises. Be well.
Thank you.